You know, when you hear about criminal communities on the dark web, the picture you probably have in your head is one of these shadowy, super-organized syndicates. But what if that picture isn't the whole story? Today, we're diving into the difficult but really important topic of dark web communities built around child sexual exploitation, or CSE. We're going to go way beyond the headlines to see what academic research tells us about how these groups are actually put together.
All right, let's just jump right in with a core idea from the research. This quote, it just gets right to the point. Simply slapping the label organized crime on something feels big and serious, but it can actually blind us to what's really happening. It's a convenient label, sure, but it's not an explanation.
And that really begs the question, right? If that simple label doesn't cut it, then what does the evidence actually show? How do these communities really function? Well, let's find out. Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll poke some holes in that whole organized crime label. Then, we'll look at their completely bizarre economic model and the powerful social forces that hold them together. After that, we'll see how these groups change over time and wrap up with why getting this nuance right is absolutely critical.
Okay, first up, let's really challenge that common perception.
So, the image we usually get from the media is something like a mafia for the digital age, you know? A clear boss at the top, orders flowing down, everybody focused on making a profit. It's a simple story, and it's easy to grasp. But is that really what's going on? And this is where the researchers really flip the script. They argue that we're asking the wrong question. It's not a simple yes or no game of, are they organized crime? The much better, much more useful question is, how are they organized? In what specific ways? You see how that opens things up? It's a total game changer. Okay, so one of the best ways to start unpacking this is to look at these online forums as a kind of economic system. But you're about to see, this is a marketplace that breaks all the rules.
So, the term researchers use for this is entrepreneurial structures. It's just a way of talking about their business model. It's all the setups and arrangements they have that help the crime happen, all aimed at getting some kind of benefit. The key question is, what exactly is that benefit?
Now this is where it gets really wild. Just look at the difference. In a typical criminal market, say for drugs, it's all about money. Competition is fierce, often violent. But in these forums, the motive isn't cash. It's getting access to more material and gaining status. It's a barter system. And the goal isn't for one person to take over, but to make the whole community stronger. It's completely backwards from what you'd expect.
Let me just double down on this because it's so important. The currency here is reputation. Sharing something rare doesn't get you paid in dollars. It gets you paid in respect. It gets you a higher rank on the forum, and that rank unlocks access to even more exclusive material from other high-status members. It's an entire economy built on social capital.
And look at this. This just goes to show you, just because there's no money changing hands doesn't mean there's no structure. This is a real organizational chart from a CSE forum that was studied. It's got a CEO, administrator, admins, moderators, VIPs. It's a whole pyramid. And your spot on that pyramid is decided by what you contribute, not what's in your wallet.
Okay, but if you think this is just about some weird, moneyless marketplace, you're only getting half the story. To really get why these groups are so resilient, we have to look at the powerful social and psychological needs they're filling for their members. So the other piece of this puzzle is what researchers call associational structures. You can just think of this as the social glue. It's all the ways these groups build a real sense of belonging and a shared identity for people who very often feel totally isolated in the real world.
So what does that community actually give them? Well, it's incredibly potent. It gives them a place where they feel like they belong, where their twisted beliefs are treated as normal and valid. It builds this really strong us versus the world identity and gives them a space to talk about things without any judgment. It's fulfilling some very deep-seated human needs.
This quote, it's deeply disturbing, but you have to hear it to understand how powerful this is. An actual offender in one of these studies compared his criminal group to a support group like Alcoholics Anonymous. He said it offered mutual society, help, and comfort. That is the associational structure, that social glue in action.
Okay, so we've got this bizarre non-money market, right? And it's all held together by this super strong sense of community. But these groups aren't set in stone. They're living things. So now let's look at how they actually evolve, how they're born, how they change, and how they die. This diagram from the research basically gives us a fantastic blueprint for a group's entire life. Over on the left, you see how people get in.
In the middle, it's all about the group's identity and what members get from it. And on the right, it shows what happens to the group over time. Let's just quickly look at the very beginning and the very end of that cycle. First off, how does someone even get into one of these groups? Well, the research points to 4 main ways. Sometimes it's a formal introduction, where a current member vouches for you. Other times, if you have a special skill, you might get actively recruited. It can also happen more organically. People just find each other in certain spaces, or it can even spring up from existing friendships.
And once they're formed, these groups are always changing. They expand as new members join, they shrink when people get arrested or there's a big fight. Sometimes a huge argument can cause a schism, where the group literally splits in two and they become rivals. And eventually a lot of them just fizzle out and cease to exist altogether. They're dynamic, they're messy.
All right, so we've pulled apart the easy labels and really looked at the gears turning underneath. Let's put this all back together and talk about why this level of detail really matters.
So here's the bottom line. We're not dealing with a simple mafia-style pyramid. What we're actually looking at is a hybrid. It's part marketplace, built on barter and reputation, and it's part social club, all held together by that incredibly strong glue of community that meets very real psychological needs. It's a whole social ecosystem. And this isn't just some interesting academic theory. For law enforcement, getting this wrong has huge consequences. Think about it. If your whole strategy is to cut off a group's funding, but that group doesn't even use money, well, your strategy is dead on arrival. You have to understand how the system actually works to have any chance of breaking it.
And that really brings us to the most critical point of all. Taking down a website or arresting one person, that's a temporary fix. For any kind of long-term disruption, you have to go deeper. You have to find ways to address the powerful social and psychological pull that drags people into these communities in the first place.
So that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? These are without a doubt criminal networks committing horrific acts, but they are also communities that give their members a sense of identity and belonging. And accepting that uncomfortable fact, well, that fundamentally changes everything about how we have to approach the fight against them.